Hi, everybody. This is Adewale from StressTherapist.net. I'm just um, welcoming you to our anxiety web seminar. I understand we have about 3 people on our on the web seminar page now. We just need about 2 more people. But just before we start, let me just do a quick introduction. Um, if you've been following my posts so far, you already know who I am. My name is Adewale, and my experience is in about 15 years of mental health practice. Within the last roughly 5 to 3 years, I've been practicing as a psychotherapist, specifically cognitive behavioral therapist. Let me just introduce James now. James is my colleague. Unfortunately, he decided to leave my team and has moved to a new team now. So James, do you just want to say a little bit about yourself here?
Yes, hi, I'm James and I work with mild to moderate anxiety and depression. I've been in mental health for about 9 years and specialise in primary care, which is what we call anxiety, depression, phobias, things like that, for the past 3.5. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. All right, so the third person we've got here is Kevin. Kevin is our tech expert. He's here to just make sure everything works smoothly. I just want everybody to see his face because what he's doing is probably the most important part of this seminar because he keeps everything running in sync. So Kevin, how many people do we have now?
3 people, I believe.
Okay, right. So we'll just wait until we have 2 more people, and then we'll start the seminar. Oh, hi, Anita. Welcome. Okay, if the video isn't working, Anita, have you just tried pressing the play button on the video and see if it's working? Oh, sorry, she might not be able to hear me then, Kevin.
Yeah.
So Kevin, can you just type that in?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Okay, as I was saying, Kevin is here to make sure everything works smoothly. He's going to be ensuring that we get all your questions and just making sure that everybody who comes to the page is tuned into the seminar. Right, so if you are just joining us, can you just put your name into the box? We need how many more people, Kevin? 1 more person?
Yeah.
And we'll start the presentation. James, we may need to just do a introduction again when more people turn up, yeah? Just briefly. Is James hearing me? Can James hear me? Okay, yeah, all right, okay. Okay.
The having some problem with this Flash player, so I'm just trying to sort it out.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, it's all working.
Okay, so Anita can see us now.
Yeah, they are all working.
Okay, I'm okay now. Okay. Okay, so how many people we have in total?
We have 4 people.
So we just need 1 more and we will start. If we just probably wait, let's wait another 3 minutes. If nobody else joins in the 3 minutes, I think we should just go ahead and start then, James. We'll just start, yeah. And then people hopefully will join afterwards. Okay.
I just want to say to the 4 people, hello, thank you for coming. Really, the sorts of things we'll be discussing today, we'll be running through lots of different things around anxiety. So some might be things that you can relate to, some might be things that you really don't have any sort of problem with at all. So it will really just be making sure that by the end of the discussion, depression. If there's anything left out, anything that you want that you do so, there'll be time for questions throughout. So we do want to try as much as.
Okay, so I think James, your video went a bit choppy just there for a second.
Okay.
Okay. So if you can you just repeat the last two sentences you just said.
Yeah, just obviously everything we're covering is around anxiety disorders in general, and then looking a bit more specifically at things. So some might not be applicable. There might not be things that you can relate to. Some might be things that really relate to you. Either way, if there's any questions, we will try to do our best to answer them.
Okay. Okay, so I think we'll just go ahead with the presentation. So, Anita, I don't know if you joined us when we did the introduction. So, you may already know who I am. My name is Adewale. I'm the author of StressTherapist.net, and I do a lot of posting on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. The idea is just to try and help people who struggle with different mental health difficulties with the knowledge that we have been able to acquire, things that helping people learn strategies that work, things that I've seen, and I'm sure James can also agree with this, things we've seen people use, strategies we've seen people use that have helped them break free from problems like anxiety, even depression, OCD, different types of anxiety problems and depression-related problems. Today we are focusing specifically on anxiety. So my experience is in mental health for the last 15, 16 years. In the last 5 years, I've been focusing more on psychotherapy and learning, particularly cognitive behavior therapy. And this is where I've met James. I just asked James to introduce himself again here.
Okay, so I'm James, and I've worked along Wally for a couple of years, and really we've just together just worked with anyone from the general public that has begun to feel anxious for any reason or has always felt anxious and just wants to explore it a little bit. And Wally's been doing obviously some very good work, very long work with people, and myself, I do sometimes quite brief work with people, or in a variety of ways. But either way, it's to use these ways that both Wally and I find give people some tools to manage their own anxiety, not really to get rid of it, but to make sure that your anxiety is working for you rather than against you, and that's the sort of thing that we do.
I think that's very important. So it's not about getting rid of anxiety, it's more about making sure that anxiety stops sabotaging life experiences for you. So okay, we'll carry on with the presentation then. I'm going to just share my screen, so you won't see my face for most of the rest of the presentation. You'll still be able to see James and Kevin. So just to mention, Kevin is our tech expert, so you might just be wondering what he's doing there. He's ensuring that everything we do works out smoothly. So just making sure that we are connected, well connected with everybody that joins the presentation. So if you're just joining the presentation, I just want to welcome you. So we are going to start the presentation now. Okay. Right, a set of questions I get asked quite often is, where did my problem with anxiety start from? How did it begin? How come many people around me just seem to be able to cope with difficulties that are worse than mine, and yet I just can't seem to cope with what seems so simple? To answer the question, I'll start with this statement. All problems with anxiety begin from a knowledge that we are vulnerable, that we are somehow vulnerable. Without that experience of knowledge of vulnerability, we won't have any problems with anxiety. James, can you relate to that?
Yes, of course. I mean, anything that I've done in the past has had an element of anxiety around, or excitement. Either way, it feels the same in my body. So sometimes it's something I can handle, sometimes it's something that I've escaped from. Either way, it's been because of whether there's a danger or not, or whether I've felt there's a danger. So yeah, I can feel it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had experiences with social anxiety personally myself, and where I started feeling vulnerable was because when I started feeling vulnerable was because I had very close friends who, um, in a way, were quite manipulative, and they did certain things I can't quite discuss on air that made me lose their trust, and it made me start to think, if people who are close to me like this treat me this way, how will other people who are not so close to me treat me? And hence I started feeling quite vulnerable. And so it's you may all be able to relate with this idea. Somehow, somewhere along the line, we just knew that we started feeling vulnerable. And as a result of that experience, our experience of anxiety started becoming more negative and negative. Um, a lot of the strategies we're going to be sharing closer to the end of this presentation, we'll be showing you different strategies that would help to have a better relationship with this sense of vulnerability, so that anxiety, I think I've said this already, but I'll repeat it because I think it's an important statement. Anxiety stops sabotaging life for you, and life becomes more positive and more enjoyable as a result. Okay, so the knowledge of the knowledge that we are vulnerable precedes all anxiety problems. And interestingly, there was a time when we were not anxious at all. We may not remember that much because it was a time when we were toddlers. If you think about it, just follow a group of toddlers around for a day or two, and you will notice that they put anything into their mouths. They touch anything they see, even if it's going to sting or bite them. It's almost as if they are fearless completely. James, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, really, something that I asked when I first learned all this was, well, why on earth are we learning whether we're vulnerable or not in that way? And I know that sounds like a really basic question, but I kind of just thought that a lot of this would just kind of be there, or we would have watched it. So we learn because we have needs is essentially the answer I came to. So the fearless toddler putting everything in its mouth because it has a need.
Yeah.
To feed. And so it might learn to hunt for food, or it might learn just to go to the market in today's day and age. So we also have other needs, just like Wiley was saying, needs to feel wanted and needs to be heard by people, understood, so you get that relationship with people, things like that. So they keep it more elegant now.
Okay. So this idea of needs, and if you're looking at in terms of vulnerability, the need to protect ourselves from danger is a need we all have. And quite often we don't even realize it's there, but we don't need to realize it's there before that need kind of crops up.
Yeah, that's right. But it's just to make it clear that in a way we're learning to be individual, to be human, and sometimes anxiety is part of that journey, but it's not the sole part of that journey.
Yeah. Right, so just going back to that fearless toddler, if you were to follow the same group of toddlers around maybe about the age of 4 or 5, all of a sudden you start noticing that they are running from spiders and hiding from strangers. How do they start to respond to being vulnerable in this way? What do you think, James?
Essentially, it's around that we may try to figure out this first event, or that kind of, because we learn to try and protect ourselves. We've learned that there are dangers, but at the same time it's hard to know exactly what the danger is because we don't want to put ourselves in a dangerous situation.
Right. So we find ourselves avoiding situations that might be dangerous. And is this idea that vulnerability comes from experiences of pain? Without having painful experiences, we won't feel vulnerable, will we?
I mean, that's true, but then the pain is something that can be quite unique. I mean, I could, just like you said with your friends, I remember being in situations where there was nothing explicitly painful, but it was just perhaps someone not being there. And then I felt the pain of that, and then that would begin to make me feel anxious that's about myself.
Right. sorry, I missed that, James.
I was just saying, much in that socially anxious way.
Okay. Okay. So the idea here is that experiences of pain make us know that we need to protect ourselves. So when we have those kind of painful experiences, it makes us know that we are vulnerable. And it doesn't have to be our own experience, does it? Can it be anybody else's experience? Can we watch other people experiencing pain, and that makes us feel vulnerable, James?
That's right. Although I must say at this point, sometimes when we come to this point, people try to figure out what the first event was. You know, first. So I mean, if I ask you to remember anything from that far back, it can be really hard and probably stressful in itself. So what we want to do is to let you know that even though the initial memory is there, it's not the most important thing to come to it right now. Yeah. Because by working on the situations that make you feel vulnerable at the moment, your mind might bring it up anyway, and when you're able to deal with it. The key is just to work where you feel vulnerable.
Right. So the idea here is just to start understanding that our anxiety problems start as a result of our tendency to feel vulnerable. It might be a vulnerability because of our own painful experiences, or it might be vulnerability because of watching somebody else. It could be a girl watching her mother scramble up a table because the mother sees a rat. And as a result of that, I notice your screen is flickering, James.
Green and back. Sorry about this. I can't seem... It doesn't seem to be...
I'm thinking...
Let me turn it on and off. Hold on.
Yeah, turn it on and off. Okay, so... Right, James is back with us then. You just can't trust computers, can you? They make us feel very vulnerable.
It's true.
Okay, right, so a girl watching her mother scramble up a table at the sight of a rat will most likely develop the same problem in fear of rats in the future when she sees a rat herself. So it's a natural thing that when we see someone respond to pain in a vulnerable way, that we also start feeling, so respond to an experience in a vulnerable way, we also start to feel vulnerable in to those kind of experiences. Right. So as we develop in life, we are literally building up a catalog of vulnerable experiences in our minds. So the more of these sorts of experiences we have, the more vulnerable we are likely to feel. So it's almost like those experiences have kind of been layered in our minds, in our long-term memory, telling us that we are vulnerable. So it's like we're building up this library of experience that's telling us that it's true, we are vulnerable. And vulnerable to what? Vulnerable to being bullied, vulnerable to experiences of failure, vulnerable to rejection from other people, and vulnerable to being abused or losing those we love. I think, James, you had something to say about the involuntary trigger that triggers this vulnerability.
That's right, that's right. I mean, sometimes we talk around these things, and it's always important to remember that even people that have worked in mental health for years, I don't walk around thinking I'm on a bus and it's dark, I'm thinking I'm vulnerable. I'll just start to feel anxious. Yeah. So it's good to learn this theory to try and develop an awareness of our triggers. So I might know that I might naturally begin to feel anxious on a bus in the dark. But it's okay again to not have to stop and consider it, only if we want to work on it. So whilst we're trying to get on with our lives, you're naturally learning what works well and what didn't work so well from what you've been through. If you've been on a first date, for example, and then you started dating, say 3 years later, your mind will naturally go back to meeting people, talking to people, things like that, and whether they've gone well or not would dictate how you feel sometimes.
Okay, right. So what we're saying so far is that we have experiences in our life that make us feel vulnerable. We start to trigger feelings of anxiety. After a while, we still start finding that situations that are uncertain, I think James kind of hinted on this already, situations that are uncertain starts to trigger that sense of vulnerability. Situations that pose a threat of pain. So it doesn't have to be that it's a certainty that that situation will occur. As long as it feels possible, it triggers this sense of vulnerability. And this is something I try to say to people, because most people who have no understanding of anxiety, or who haven't had experience of anxiety problems, they seem to try to tell you to just get over it. Just there's no problem. It's okay. But it doesn't quite work like that, does it, James?
No. In fact, we naturally have higher brain functions to try and find answers. This is what makes humans so amazing. So I've got this brilliant brain that problem solves for me, but the difficulty is, if I feel vulnerable but I'm not sure, I'll try and find an answer to make myself feel a bit safer. But what if it's something that I can't answer? What if it's something uncertain? Then my mind would continue trying problem solve, and that's what Wiley was hinting at when we start to worry, things like that.
Yeah.
So a plan is really helpful if I can do something about it, but if I can't, then my mind will keep trying to problem solve. Well, what if that girl stands me up? Well, and I'll just I'll buy a few drinks and I'll look at my phone. What if other people start to crowd around me? Well, then I'll probably just turn my shoulder. But what if this? And it would keep going on and on and on, because essentially I can't have complete certainty in what I'm going to do.
And that can be very difficult, because that possibility that something can happen, even though it's uncertain, creates a huge amount of anxiety. And as a result, because we can't plan for it and we can't control it, we begin to find ourselves worrying. And this is where worry can become kind of all-encompassing. You find yourself trying to really solve the problem, and James' screen is flickering again. So I try to really solve the problem through worrying.
Yes. Sorry about my video, everyone. So you're right, and those things will begin to make us feel more and more anxious, because the more we worry, the more we'll think about dangers, the more anxious we'll feel. Now, it doesn't mean these dangers aren't possible, but sometimes if you might have been interrupted when you've been worrying, then you'll eventually sort of be distracted and then come back to what you were doing, and you might think, what was I worrying about again? Or we might not remember the specific plan, but we remember the danger. So there's a hint there towards how sometimes this problem solving isn't working in our best interests if it's something we can't answer. But Wiley will go through something about how we can be fairer to ourselves. The important thing is to remember our brains are biologically wired to find these answers and try and problem solve. So it's not our fault for getting into a worry. It's just our responsibility to do something differently afterwards.
Okay, I'll just read briefly some of the questions that have come up so far. Anita says she has been enjoying the emails that have been sending with regards to emotional health. Thank you so much, Anita. And she's asking a question, James. I have major depression and also OCD, social anxiety, and GAD, and just all that together, that's quite a lot of things to cope with, isn't it, James? Because anxiety on its own can be quite excruciating. So anxiety, OCD, and social anxiety, and GAD, all put together, there's quite a lot to bear with. So I can understand your pain there, Anita. So the question goes on. I have had 2 hand surgeries in the past, and medical bills are suddenly showing up for the entire year. I know there is nothing I can do about it, but it isn't just enough to quell the anxiety. What can I do to quell the anxiety? I think some of the things we're going to be talking about today would help with that, Anita. I'm starting the seminar just looking at the problem of anxiety to start with, and then at the end of the seminar, close to the end, we'll be looking at the different solutions and different things we can do. Because I believe without understanding what anxiety is, it might feel very confusing if we're just talking about the solutions themselves. What do you think, James?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Wiley, because it is frightening. It's awful. And thank you, Anita, for being so honest. And just as Wiley was saying, we'll go through lots of different things.
So if anybody is watching this presentation after we have presented it live on air, all you just have to do to watch the remaining part of this presentation is to just put in your email and your name in the form that will be below this presentation. Then you can get free access to the remaining part of the presentation.